You're listening to Hopeful by Nature. This is the podcast where we inspire hope by talking to people around the globe who are doing the work of connecting kids and communities to the natural world to care for and protect the places where we play. I used to teach elementary school, and I had this whole toolkit of outdoor games built to teach ecology through metaphor. One day, I was walking a class of kids across a four-way stop toward the park, cones already set up, activities planned, and every single one of them stopped dead over a trail of ants. I remember being furious, and then realizing mid-fury that I was the one who had it backwards. This week, I'm talking to Haiman, birder, naturalist, and author of a brand new book, Birds of the California Delta. Aaron built an entire career in a body of science communication work with real political weight behind it, on a version of the same realization. People protect what they love, and they love what they already understand. My name's Scott Shepard, I'm your host, and you're listening to Hopeful by Nature. So tell us a little bit more about who you are, like what brings you here today?
I am a firm believer, and this is not my idea. It has been stated by many people very intelligently and compellingly that humans are really much more likely to save things that we love, and we will love things that we understand and know. And so it seems like the very first step towards saving the natural world and the natural environment, loving it, useful, knowing it is the first step. So how do we do that? And how can I play a part in that?
That's really awesome. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. There's a famous David Attenborough quote that's pretty similar, and I'm paraphrasing,
Yes.
but like children won't care for places that they don't love, and they won't love places that they don't understand. I know for me
Yeah.
in my life, like I learned to love the outdoors by time spent on my bike with my buddies, picking fruit off of the local trees, or swimming and snorkeling and surfing out in the ocean in my neighborhood. But like, take us back to the very beginning. What brought you onto this path? How did you fall in love with nature?
Well, similarly to you, a lot of time spent in the outdoors. I was lucky enough to grow up in the East Bay Hills, and I had a whole East Bay Regional Park District network of parks within easy spitting distance of my house. And I spent a lot of time roaming around the oak woodlands and the California grasslands, savannas of the East Bay Hills. And that really instilled in me a very deep interest in sort of the natural world and an enjoyment in just spending time in it, even if I didn't know what anything was. Just being out there and sort of having those adventures was really fun and always ended up being really compelling. And as I got to know that more and kind of gravitated more towards animals than anything else, plants are very cool, and I'm a big fan, and mushrooms as well. But animals have always felt sort of held a special place and sort of grabbed my attention and fascination. And so, those early years wandering around in the East Bay Hills, finding animals, seeing animals, kind of got the interest started in general. And when I was little, I wasn't really sure what direction you go in. When I was really little, I remember kind of thinking that if I wanted to work with animals, that meant being a veterinarian.
Sure.
And it wasn't until I actually met a ornithologist, a biologist who studied birds in the Marin Headlands, that I was like, oh, that's a cool path. I could do that too. And honestly, that guy kind of inspired me to start down this path, and he's been a friend and mentor ever since. And I still feel like in some ways I kind of want to be him when I grow up to this day.
I have friends and mentors that are like that for me as well. I really relate to that. Just like finding a love of being outside and finding a love of exploring from the things that fascinate you and keep you curious. For me, it was an educator that had this lifestyle that I really envied. He had been a dog
Mm.
sledding instructor up in Canada. He had sailed around the world. He had traveled all throughout Southeast Asia, leading kayaking and canoeing experiences. And that was what I really wanted to do. But so following in the footsteps of this ornithologist is kind of what led you in this direction. Is that why you selected birds and maybe not like herps or insects or the amazing mammals that you might find throughout the state of California?
It's an excellent question. I mean, I think to a certain extent, it was that first naturalist, that guy that I met he studied birds. He was the director of a bird migration research center. And so just sort of the idea of having a career focused around birds was pretty interesting to me. But then in their own rights, birds have always been these fascinating creatures. I mean, they can fly.
Yeah.
I mean, that's like superpower level an ability right there, right?
Yeah.
People create characters and give them this incredible power of flight to make them super cool. And birds just have that right off the bat.
Yeah.
And they're beautiful and they sound incredible. And they're also always around. Like anywhere I would go, anywhere you or I could go, into the heart of the most industrialized, developed city, or way out into the pristine Arctic landscape, there are birds in all of those places, which
Yeah.
makes them pretty accessible and pretty exciting.
Yeah, I found birding when I was teaching elementary school for the exact same reason. I was constantly trying to get kids outside and engage them in these really traditional outdoor and environmental education games and activities, and they just didn't have the tolerance or the stamina to listen to me explain how to play these games. And I felt like I was constantly failing because I wasn't holding their attention. But what I realized they were distracted was the wildlife around us, primarily like birds,
Aha.
squirrels. One time in particular, we were trying to cross a four-way stop and there was this trail of ants. And I was so angry at these kids for staring at these ants. And in that moment, I realized I was totally off base. Like, why was I
Like,
mad
oh,
at them
hang
looking
on.
at the ants? Let's just focus on the ants. And that became a whole, eye-opening experience for how we develop the foundational skills for just being outside by leaning into
Yeah.
curiosity. And it sounds like you kind of found that on your own. Can you put yourself back in the shoes of young Aaron? Maybe one of the first times that you were following that ornithologist out somewhere. Maybe it's East Bay, maybe it's Marin Headlands. What was it like to see a new bird for the first time that you had no idea what it was called? And how does that differ from the way you feel now when you see a bird and you know all kinds of scientific information about it?
Oh, I mean, in some ways, I actually still think that I get those experiences. One of the fun things about birds is there are so many of them around the planet. And so you can travel to new places and sort of be back in that childlike state of I'm not entirely sure what the birds are in this new country that I've never been to before, in a different part of the world that I've never visited. And so you go out and I see a bird on a bush, and it's like, wow, I don't know what that is,
Yeah.
but it's fantastic. It's beautiful. It's amazing. It's doing interesting things. Like I get to have that experience over and over and over again. When I was a kid, having that happen was always very exciting. And I mean, seeing especially a new species of bird for the first time was really exciting, and it has continued to be really exciting my entire life.
I had the opportunity to go with my wife to Peru like 2 years ago now. And we were in the Amazon and seeing macaws for the first time, seeing all these different species
Oh,
of birds that I had never even heard or thought of before, like birds of paradise. And just a few weeks ago, I was with my son in his school uh, in Pinnacles National Park, and I saw a condor for the first time. And that was
awesome.
that's so cool that you get a chance to continue feeling that sense of awe and wonder through your work. And I know like you've pursued this path where you've gotten a bachelor's degree in science, you have two master's degrees from two different highly reputable universities here in the state of California. And that's not an accident. That's like a deliberate pursuit.
Yeah.
Uh, so, was it clear from the moment that you stepped onto campus that this was exactly what you needed to be doing, like diving into deep and hard science? Was there a sense of wonder that was pulling you in that direction and you kind of stumbled into where you are now?
No, it was actually even before I set foot on campus. I mean, I am kind of lucky in many ways that I stumbled across birding and kind of bird science when I was about 6 years old. And like that's when I first met that naturalist. And that's when the hooks got into me and they really never let go. And so that meant that I had, from 6 most of my teenage years, kind of talking with biologists, hanging out with bird biologists, looking at bird science and scientists, and getting to know some of these people, and becoming more and more convinced that, yeah, this is the direction that I want to go in. And from all those conversations and all that exposure, it became pretty clear that if you want to make a go of being a scientist, I think in most fields, you need a college education, and you need even an advanced degree of some kind.
Yeah.
And so, you know, pretty much everybody who I saw and who I talked to who had these jobs, who were research associates or research directors or professors, all those titles that kind of had an idea of where I kind of wanted to go, they all had advanced degrees. So I was like, well, okay, apparently these are some of the stepping stones that I'm going to need if I want to make this work. And so long before I even applied to an undergraduate program, I knew that I was going to have to go some distance in the whole educational world.
And that's pretty unique, I think, for a lot of people. There are a lot of young kids that want to grow up and be an astronaut or want to grow up and be a firefighter or whatever that
Sure.
might be. And they understand, like, okay, I'm going to need to have a lot of discipline. I'm going to need to go get an advanced degree. I'm going to have a long path ahead of me. But somewhere along the way, the weight of academia kind of deflates their love or passion for the thing that they're studying or the thing that like got them down that road in the first place. But it sounds
Yeah,
like that never really happened for you.
it didn't, but I think I had a sort of unusual set of advantages there because I definitely did feel the weight of academia on many occasions. But one of the things that I think sort of buffered me against that weight was the fact that I was homeschooled from when I was a preschool age kid until I started going to junior college classes. And I think I can definitely see how having all of those extra years of school and of academia would add a lot of weight that you would have to carry or sort of inertia you have to push against if you're still trying to pursue that sort of ultimate goal. And I feel like I kind of got an end run around a lot of that early weight. I got to be spending a lot more time out in the field, just sort of poking around the hills, doing what I wanted to do, following my own interests, pursuing as widely or as deeply various subject matters kind of as it struck me. And so I didn't have that weight of academia, somebody else, somebody external to me telling you, okay, this period, you are now going to learn this, and you're going to do it for this many minutes, and then you're going to have a break, and then you're going to do it for this one. I didn't have that for a long, long time until I started going to college. But so I think I felt some of that weight build up, but not as much as maybe other people do.
And I also like how you said you could really hone in as widely or as deeply as you saw fit, because that seems kind of like what you're doing now as you're going from hard science into science communication. Like you're broadening your scope, but you're also kind of narrowing it
Mhm.
down. I know you started a birding naturalist back in April of 2012. Like what
Yeah.
really inspired you to go down that path to like broaden your horizons a little bit?
So at that point, I was in grad school. I was at UC Davis and I was pursuing my first master's degree in avian science. And I was reading all these scientific papers and I was hanging out in these labs with bird scientists, like hard science people.
Yeah.
And I was also like for fun going out and hanging out in the birding community. I'd go on bird walks and hang out with my birding friends. And one of the things that frustrated me and also kind of surprised me was how often those groups did not overlap or even really talk to each other. I kind of came into it assuming that surely these wouldn't even be two different groups. They'd be just one giant group. All the people who were interested in birds, like surely they would all get together and that's just one big bird group. But a lot of the bird researchers I met were interested in some of the science questions, but they almost didn't care what species they were looking at. If it happened to be a bird that was a good model for the hormones they wanted to study, then cool, then birds would be their subject matter. But it could have been a lizard or a mouse, just whatever kind of worked, because they were interested in the hormones. They were interested in the research questions. And a lot of the birders so into seeing birds and identifying birds and being able to track, where birds could be found in different places, they didn't always have a great grasp of all of the deeper research ideas that were coming out of academia. So it was like this disconnect between these two groups. And I was like, well, this is crazy. And I was sort of complaining about this over and over and over again. And independently, after one of my rants at one time or another, my wife and brother both mentioned to me, like, hey, you know what? You keep talking about this, you keep complaining about this. You should like start writing about it, write a blog to bring these groups together. Like you should do something about that. And I am smart enough to know that when those two individuals, very important individuals in my life, both tell me to do something, I really should do that thing. And so I started a birding naturalist.
That's really cool. So it was both the frustration of a disconnect between these two communities that you thought really should be one with each other, and the push of the people that you love in your life to go
Yeah.
and do something about that disconnect. I've
Yeah. The
met
encouragement was hugely important.
I've met so many people in like this conservation education field that have had both the combination of frustration and love result
Yeah.
in an outcome that has inspired them to bring together community to
Nice.
take care of places. For me
Do you? Yeah.
in my own life, like I love to surf, and I grew up
Cool.
surfing not too far from the US Mexico border in San Diego. And when I was a kid, it would rain maybe 3, 4 times a year. But when it rained, you couldn't go surfing for a week. And it was because of urban runoff and cross-border pollution from Tijuana entering the Pacific Ocean. And
Uh,
if you went in, you would get really sick. You could walk out with hepatitis, you know? So I became really, really frustrated about that and started getting involved in local cleanups, in advocacy organizations, in improving access to the ocean so that other people would get fired up about this issue. And that's partly what led me down the path that I'm on today in outdoor and environmental education. I was offered the opportunity to start my own program at an
hmm.
elementary school. Um, and I took all of my knowledge and experience of like taking kids outside and brought them to that elementary school thinking, oh, I can just take this outdoor facilitator guy hat and bring it into the classroom. And the reality
Uh,
was it was totally different. And I started designing this curriculum that was meant to create the foundational skills that young people needed to be outside. By developing this curriculum, I learned about interpretation and I learned about interpreters, and that led me into working for state parks and then working for the Monterey Bay Aquarium. But there's this disconnect that I see that I'm frustrated about, just like you, between interpreters and educators. Uh,
right. Another group that like you think of two groups that should be surely one group. And
yes,
I'm like, why are they different?
yeah. Most educators don't even know that interpretation exists. Like
Huh.
interpreters are always complaining about like, oh, when I tell people I'm an interpreter, they say, "What language do you speak?" It's like, of course they say, "What language do you speak?" No one knows what interpretation is. And then for like interpreters are always mad at classroom educators because classroom educators come out to their park or their aquarium or their zoo and they don't pay attention. They're on their phone. They're doing whatever. They're not helping you with the kids. It's because you didn't give them anything to do. You're not engaging them in the process. So
Right.
my bias is that good educators naturally lean into interpretation because they want to inspire
Yeah.
wonder and awe and curiosity. And good interpreters naturally lean into education because they want people to walk away with more information than they had when they arrived. And I'm curious, like in your field of scientific communication that you've now been doing for a little over a decade, almost 15 years, like where do you feel like you land between those two groups? And how do you feel like we could maybe bring those two groups closer together?
Uh, I I kind of struggle sometimes with the idea of and title of teacher educator. Because I think that so much of learning is a very internal process. You can go out into the world and you can read a book, you can listen to a lecture, you can do something, and you can take that knowledge into yourself.
Yeah.
I can't really force it into you. I can't really do that to you. It's something that you got to get a buy-in from you.
Yeah.
I try to facilitate the idea that, here is a bunch of stuff that maybe you might want to internalize. Maybe you might want to learn this stuff. And I'm happy to make that path as smooth as possible. But like, that's all. I'm maybe just sort of a guide showing you the trail. You got to walk down the trail yourself.
I love that. And what I'm hearing you say is like interpreters and educators meet in the middle through facilitation, facilitating curiosity, facilitating awe, facilitating wonder. You've been heading down this road of facilitation and you've just written a book. And how does
Yes.
that book help to facilitate the type of change or the type of connection that you'd like to see between these two communities or between the larger community at large?
Yeah. The book that I wrote is part of a series, and this publishing company, they're called Heyday Books. And they started putting together this series of books on what they refer to as hyper-local birding. They would work with an author who knew about a specific location, like a city or a particular lake, like a particular part of California. And they'd work with that author to develop stories of 25 species that you could find at that location and that really sort of embodied and told the story of that place. And so my place was the California Delta, the Sacramento San Joaquin Delta. And so my sort of goal was to pick 25 species that told the story in some compelling way about the Delta itself, about issues that were facing the Delta, that the Delta like is maybe under threat from, things like habitat destruction or pollution, stuff like that. And then also to pick some that told stories of the birds themselves and like the lives of that the birds were sort of experiencing, everything from migration to just the little day-to-day things of going out and finding insects for the babies you got waiting for you back in the nest. And so that was my goal, was to sort of to build a bridge between the research, the science that's out there, how far do birds travel? Where do they travel? How long does that take them to take those journeys? That kind of stuff. And then also the more intimate things that a lot of birders are really familiar with, and to merge both of those together to tell the story of these 25 species.
So it's not just a field guide where you're like,
Mm.
oh, the bird looks like this, and this is where you can find it, and here's its migratory patterns. It's a story that people can follow. It's a narrative that brings people into the conversation about science and what scientists are learning about these particular species in this one hyperlocal region. That sounds fascinating.
You talked about how it's not a field guide. And when you think about the pictures of a field guide, they're very sort of stereotypical, always in profile. And the illustrator that I worked with, who's an incredibly talented illustrator, she's from Costa Rica. Her name is Martha Espinosa. And we worked together to develop illustrations that were not just those sort of carbon copy, cut and paste silhouettes of birds, but that they showed the birds in their environment or doing interesting behaviors, sort of more coming to life to tell their own story rather than just a field guide.
That sounds fascinating. I know that scientific illustration, just like scientific communication, has such an incredible way to inspire people to be curious and to want to learn more. So it's always amazing when you're able to bring in a really talented scientific illustrator. I used scientific illustration when I was teaching birding with my students as a way to stimulate their own curiosity by like inviting them in to engage in science with us through illustration. Through my own life as a facilitator, I often learn more from teaching and from sharing knowledge or sharing space with people than I do from independent research or
Mm,
independent learning. What do
yeah,
you feel like you learned from writing that you couldn't learn from the scientific research that you've done in the past?
writing. It was a good exercise and made me sort of work this muscle that like I know you're supposed to do this, but knowing about something and actually doing it can sometimes be two very different things. And when you're trying to reach someone, when you're trying to share knowledge, one of the important things is to remember and to try to figure out where they're starting from.
Yeah.
You don't want to just like launch into a dry PhD dissertation about something or other if the person that you're talking to isn't interested in PhD dissertation-y kind of knowledge. And so that was definitely something that I had to remember when I was writing my book and kind of relearn several times of, okay, Aaron, hold it, back up. Where is this reader that you're imagining, or this group of readers that you're imagining? And what are they going to want to learn? And what are they going to want to know about? What might they be curious about? What stories could I tell that would engage them? Not just because I'm interested in it, because I think they might be interested in it. And so I did have to sort of learn and relearn that several times just over the writing of this one book. And I'm sure that I will have to continue learning and relearning that as I go forward.
Yeah, I mean, that's the process of storytelling, understanding your audience, ensuring that it's relevant, ensuring that it's speaking to their values, ensuring that it's touching on the tangible and intangible
Mhm.
aspects of their lived experience so that they can relate to what it is that you're sharing. These are all like concepts in interpretation. And
Oh,
educators often discover those concepts through practice. They're taught to be culturally relevant. They're taught to be culturally
hmm,
responsive. They're taught to focus on specific techniques or strategies that might engage a young person in something that they wouldn't have been interested in otherwise. And that's why I think those two groups need to come together and be working together more effectively. And when they do, amazing things happen. When I
yeah.
worked for state parks, I created a program called the Passport Symposium, where we started
Hmm,
bringing teachers on field trips to parks and equipping them with all of the knowledge and expertise of interpreters and allowing them to design new curriculum. And if we had 30 teachers come
nice.
out, we'd have 30 new experiences that young people could have prior to their engagement with a particular park. And like that's the type of work that we can have facilitated through collaboration. Quick break from the conversation, something I want to share with you directly because it connects exactly to what Aaron and I were just circling around, the gap between people who know a subject and people who know how to teach it. I'm Scott Shepard, founder of Wildwood Institute. Before I started this podcast, I built a program at California State Parks called the Passport Symposium, bringing classroom teachers out into parks and handing them the same tools interpreters use. Not just information, but the skill of turning a place into an experience. 30 teachers would come through and we'd walk away with 30 new field trip experiences designed by people who actually know their students. That gap between subject matter experts and the people responsible for making that subject matter land with a room full of kids is the same gap I hear in almost every organization I work with. Brilliant scientists, brilliant naturalists, brilliant program staff who were never trained in how kids learn, regulate, or engage. Through the field program audit, I work with organizations to look honestly at how their programs are built, what's working, what's not, and where the real opportunities are to close that exact gap. If that's a conversation worth having for your organization, I'd love to talk. You'll find the details at wildwardinstitute.net. That's WILDWARD institute.net. Now, back to Aaron. So, Aaron, you've written this book, you've been blogging for about 12 years, and now you have a YouTube channel that has 1,167 subscribers as of this morning. That's a pretty
Oh,
big number from my opinion. What things have you learned from a human perspective, not necessarily about the algorithm, that
mhm.
really get people to stop and listen and focus on what it is that you have to say?
Yeah. So jumping from writing my blog and being very text-based for a very long time into video and sort of visual arts, if you will, has definitely been a big shift. It's not something that I have any kind of like extensive background in. It's very much something that I'm learning along the way. And one of the things that I've picked up on is people people connect with things that are sort of the everyday. I can create a video about some sort of esoteric aspect of evolution. And even if I try to tie it back to maybe, the butterflies you see in your backyard, it's kind of out there. But if I can do a video about garden snails, which I haven't done, but actually I'm planning, so stay tuned. That seems to be the kind of thing that grabs people's attention because we've all seen snails crossing the paths around our house. We've all seen snails in our gardens. Like they're just this everyday part of nature that we experience very, very commonly. And so learning more about that seems to be something that grabs people's attention.
I think we're speaking the same language. What we were just talking about a moment ago with like my students looking at this whole trail of ants, I
Yes.
was trying to get them involved in some kind of esoteric tag game to teach them about carrying capacity when I should have just been stopping and looking at things that were accessible to them. I can tell you, like when I was a kid, I wasn't allowed to have pets, and I
Ah.
had lots of snail pets. I remember watching them like walk crawl up my little baby arm hairs as a kid and like looking super closely at their slime trails, like feeding them lettuce from my parents' refrigerator, all
Yeah.
kinds of different things like that. That was the first kind of baby step into being curious and inspiring myself to continue to look more closely. And you're doing that now with kids through the Drake's Beach Sanderlings. You mentioned earlier, like inviting birders to come in and participate in science. It sounds like that's what young people are doing through that work as well. Like they're helping to further our scientific understanding of birds by gathering observations, documenting those observations. What exactly do you have those young people doing?
Yeah, so the Drake's Beach Sanderlings is kind of a special case in a lot of ways. So Birdathon is these events that get put on by various organizations. And they're kind of these competitive events where teams go out within a certain amount of time, usually it's 24 hours, and in a specific location, usually it's a county of California. And the goal is to go out and see as many species of birds as you possibly can in that location in that 24-hour time frame. And it's often done as a fundraiser for like a bird research nonprofit or something like that. And that is, in fact, the one that I've been participating in for 26 years now, which is for Point Blue Conservation Science, which is this amazing bird research, climate change research organization. And so the Drake's Beach Sanderlings is the longest running youth birdathon team that I'm aware of anywhere. And it's where a group of kids and, some of us who are young at heart, but perhaps chronologically a bit older, come together and we take on a county of California and a 24-hour period, and we zoom around trying to see as many species of bird as we possibly can. And so it's fast paced, it's kind of competitive, it's very high energy, but it's one of the birding high points of my year.
That's amazing. So it's taking birding and turning it into not just like a personal curiosity, scientific exploration, but like a team competitive effort to support our greater understanding of climate, of birds, of science in the
Yeah.
world around us. I I know you also are pretty involved in political advocacy. Does this work with the Drake's Beach Sanderlings? How does that lead you into what you're doing now with environmental advocacy or using your communication
Yeah.
platform to invite others to do the same?
I think the kids who come and join the Sanderlings are already pretty hotshot birders. Like they've already been bitten by the bug. And so I think that if I can help facilitate them, just sort of nudge them a little bit more in that direction, then I've done my job because they're already going there, right? They're already heading kind of off into the I care about the environment, I care about birds kind of mindset. And so I just want to make sure that they sort of find what they are looking for there, that they're supported, and they keep on doing that. I work with some other groups sometimes where the foundation isn't quite as established. They aren't like I'll go out and mentor groups of high school students in habitat restoration and ecology projects. And those are kids that are not already obsessive birders or obsessive habitat restoration people. They're maybe kind of interested, maybe something of an inclination in that direction, but it isn't really fully formed. It's not really fully developed. And so there I see my role as more sort of sparking more interest. How do you stay engaged? Why is it important to stay engaged? Why does it matter to restore a habitat? So different groups, different kids coming from different places with different interests and backgrounds, trying to, like I said, meet them where they are and sort of do something useful and beneficial from there.
And it sounds like you're not just doing that through your engagement with youth and through your engagement of, leading birding walks, but you're also doing it through your management of the stream flow enhancement program at the Wildlife Conservation Board. So that's a California state agency that works directly on the waterways that the January 2025 presidential memorandum specifically targeted. So I'm curious,
Yeah.
like, can you tell our audience that's listening here today, like, what was that memorandum and what was it like to feel the spotlight of the federal government on a place that you care about and you're protecting through your professional life?
Yeah, so that was one of several memorandums now that has been targeted at California and California water. That one in particular was this insane idea that if you could open up dams and release more water into rivers, that would somehow get more water to Southern California, get it into the California aqueduct, get it into Southern California, where it could then help fight fires and stuff like that. And the problem is that there is a total disconnect between the water used to fight fires and the waters in most of the rivers in California going out into the Delta. Like they're completely different watersheds, different bodies of water, different rivers, different even like uses of water. So the idea that you could tap into one and benefit the other just means you don't know anything about how California water works. That is one of many examples of times when people have, from the federal government, from this current administration in particular, have leveled something at California's water. And just when you start to understand what they're saying, it raises the obvious fact that they don't know really what they're talking about here in this state. And it's been interesting every time it happens. It's always a little bit interesting to have that kind of national level attention aimed at something you're doing. One of the other projects that not my program, but a different program at my agency has funded is this big wildlife crossing down in Southern California, the Wallace-Annenberg Wildlife Crossing. It's a huge deal. It's one of the biggest wildlife crossings in the country, maybe in the world. And being as sort of big and high profile, it goes across 101, which, significant highway. And it has also drawn fire from various national sort of level policy and politicos types. I heard somebody recently say that it's this ridiculous crossing. All it does is connect these mountains to those mountains. It's like, yes, that's actually the whole point. That's why we're doing it. There's this mountain range over here, and there's this other mountain range over here, and 101 cuts them in half, and we want to reconnect. That's exactly the point. It's like you saw the point, ran smack into it, and still somehow managed to miss it.
Yeah, I think a lot of people don't fully understand that there's so much human infrastructure, which then creates restrictive pathways and areas for wildlife to be able to interbreed with each
Yeah.
other and to be able to like ensure that we're actually a biodiverse ecosystem. And inbreeding is not good. You know, genetic isolation is not good. It's not just not good for the animals, but it's not
Mhm.
good for humans.
Yeah.
It can influence animal behavior. Like in the Santa Cruz Mountains where I live, the 17 highway is right around the corner. And this person that runs the Santa Cruz Puma Project said that like the 17 is where mountain lions go to die. And I remember in this
Ah,
presentation, this person asking, why? Why do they go to die there? And it's like, no, 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 no. They're not going to choose to die. It's that they die there all the time because they actually need to get across Highway 17 in
mhm.
order to live a healthy life as a wild animal, in order to find like a mate, in order to not interbreed with, other members of their immediate family. You don't want to do that. I don't want to do that.
Right.
Animals don't want to do that either. it must be interesting to kind of take some heat when you're advocating for things that people have a hard time understanding. And like that's another reason to engage in scientific communication. What's really been the public response that you've received to speaking out against some of these environmental policies that are coming from the federal government that are clearly like misunderstood?
The vast majority of comments that I get, of messages that I get on all of my social media platforms are all really encouraging. Like by and large, I've managed to connect with really wonderful communities and it's great fun. That being said, there is that subset of the internet that comes and finds my content and has something negative to say about it. And in a lot of ways, I'm actually perfectly happy to take that heat. I think that as a straight white male, I have a lot of privilege and I have a lot of positionality. And if I can step into the crosshairs and take some of that heat from other groups, I'm perfectly happy to. It costs me nothing. Some of the videos that I get the most vitriol on are my Pride videos. Every year in June, in honor of Pride, I put out some kind of video highlighting how homosexuality or some other aspect of the LGBTQIA plus identity is actually completely natural. And it's not weird. It's not this anomaly that needs to be explained or anything like that. It's wildly found throughout the animal kingdom. And even though I am definitely not a member of that community myself, I still think that I can bring some of my animal behavior expertise and my ecology expertise to the subject. And if I can help explain why it's totally natural to be gay, and that helps somebody, fantastic. And if somebody on the internet wants to spend their time getting mad at me for that, that's great. Like, by all means, be mad at me, leave the other people alone.
As straight, white, cisgender men, we have positionality, we have power, that we have privileges that other people don't necessarily get to experience. And sometimes when you put yourselves out there in that spotlight in an attempt to be an ally for others, you're seen as almost like adopting saviorist behavior. And
Yeah.
that can be challenging too, because that's certainly not your intent. Your intent is to communicate to the public that this phenomenon, which a lot of people perceive to be just within the human species, or it's somehow like becoming more popular or something, is actually natural and is actually happening in the natural world and with wildlife all around us. I'm curious, like, how do you, in your effort to like educate and communicate with the public, keep yourself from falling into that type of category of being seen as someone that's trying to save others, but maybe when they're not invited to do so?
Yeah, this is a subject that I struggle with a lot. It's I really worry about this topic because there are some gray areas that I am not entirely sure how to navigate sometimes. Heck, often. Some of the techniques that I've adopted that I think are working and I hope are working are making sure that it's very clear where I am in the sort of spectrum of things, that I'm, not a member of the community, and that if you want to learn more about the community, you really should go and talk to somebody who is, right? By trying to sort of push attention to others. I'm trying to hopefully not come off as a savior that way. And also to try to stick to the facts as much as I possibly can. To say, look, all the taxa of animals where homosexuality or same-sex sexual behavior can be observed.
Mhm.
And here's some of the genetic mechanisms for why evolution might preserve that. And here's some of the social benefits of these behaviors. Just trying to say, like, look, these are patterns that we see in the natural world that are out there. And I guess do with that information what you will.
Yeah.
And I'm hoping that that also makes it clear that what I'm trying to do is just spread accurate information around and not save anybody.
Yeah. And I would hope that your intent to be an ally through sharing accurate, scientifically accurate information is perceived in that way. And so often our intent is not the outcome. I applaud the fact that you're continuing to try your efforts to just like have a conversation and invite other people to do the same, not just as it relates to social issues, not just as it relates to political issues, but conservation and environmental issues as well. So
Yeah.
I would argue that like that's one of the core focuses of scientific communication, and it's having that conversation, inviting people in to do the same. So
Hmm.
I am so appreciative of all of your time to come and talk with me today, Aaron. This has been such a fun conversation. I feel like we've just really skimmed the surface. We have to continue talking about so many other things. So
Totally.
I'm going to need to invite you back. But before I let you go, what do you feel like is one thing that our listeners should do, however many there may be, as soon as they get done with this podcast to help care for and protect the places where we play?
Think global, act local. There are these huge issues like environmental pollution and habitat destruction and loss of biodiversity and climate change. These big, big topics. And sometimes they can feel overwhelming. Like, how can I possibly make any difference in these gigantic issues? But the thing is, we all can make a difference. If we all figure out our small little things to do in our neighborhoods and our communities, and that makes things better in some way, those create some habitat or reduce our carbon footprint or whatever the case may be. Those small differences that we can all make add up into huge globe changing differences. And so my advice would be go out and look at your neighborhood, look at your yard, look at your community, and figure out what is something that maybe you could do. Maybe it's a trash cleanup. Maybe there's a local park and you can just go around once a week or once a month and pick up the trash and keep that plastic out of the environment. Maybe it's biking to work a little bit more often. Maybe it's eating a little bit less meat. There are all these things that we can all totally do on an individual level. And then if we all do them together, it'll make a big difference.
You've been listening to Hopeful by Nature. If you'd like to see photos from Aaron's fieldwork, learn more about birds of the California Delta, and read more about our conversation, visit wildwardinstitute.net. That's WILDWARD Institute.net. That's where I publish a newsletter with every episode, going deeper into the story than we have time for here. If something in this conversation stuck with you, Aaron's advice is a good place to start. Look at your own yard, your own street, your own neighborhood, and find the one small thing you could actually do this week. If you like what you're hearing, subscribe to Hopeful by Nature wherever you listen. Leave us a review and head to wildwardinstitute.net to stay in the loop on what's coming next.